We've gone for redundant set sequencer start. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15, 14, 13, T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have
Roger, roll. Roger, roll complete. Roger on the set, Columbia. Mark, 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Confirm solid rocket booster set. Roger, we confirm the set, Columbia. 9 minutes, 3 seconds. Confirming zero main. Shuttle Control, Houston, 12 minutes mission elapsed time. We've had loss of signal with Columbia through Bermuda. The next station to acquire will be Madrid.
Go for main engine start.
We have a go for main engine start. Mission and liftoff of Discovery, celebrating its 25th birthday by racking up science and supplies to the space station.
The solid rocket boosters a little away.
Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check. Roger, roll.
How would you test the spaceworthiness of the shuttle? There's a lot of different ways such a thing could have been done. Remember that, in order to send living things to space, several stepping stones were used. The first animals in space were a pair of fruit flies aboard a V-2 rocket, used to test the effects of radiation exposure at high altitudes. Following this, Russia launched a number of rhesus monkeys into space, many of them not coming back, in order to test orbital launch and recovery capabilities. Afterwards, later tests would include dogs like the famous Laika, the first animal to orbit the Earth. Only after this point did we begin sending humans into space, once we had done tests and sacrificed non-human lives to ensure the safety of such a thing. So, what about testing the first reusable spacecraft? Of course, we've already covered approach and landing tests, and stress tests on the Enterprise told us she could easily survive the intense forces of launch and re-entry. Perhaps a suborbital launch would be the safer approach, ensuring it can both get to space and return. Perhaps an uncrewed powered flight test, sending an empty shuttle into orbit and back again. Maybe, as NASA management suggested at the time, this flight should be used to test the early abort system, which would detach the shuttle from the tank and boosters in the event of an emergency and use its main engines to return to the launch site. No, said astronaut John W. Young, the 9th man to walk on the moon. Let's not practice Russian roulette, because you may have a loaded gun there. Instead, Young's influence overruled the decision to test the abort system, and STS-1, the first shuttle mission, remained as a full orbital mission, crew and all. Shuttle Columbia's first mission brought the die-hard space cowboy spirit of the Apollo program with it by having Young as the flight's commander. Piloting the shuttle was Robert L. Crippen, who had worked previously on the Skylab missions, NASA's first attempt at a permanent space station, though only as a capsule communicator, meaning STS-1 would be his first trip to space. The mission had 113 individual flight test goals, and it met every single one of them. Since this is the first time it happened, allow me to explain the process of how the space shuttle launched. Remember that it's essentially 4 parts: the orbiter itself, the external tank, painted white for only this and the second mission, containing propellant for the orbiter's RS-25 engines, and 2 solid rocket boosters to aid in the initial launch. The RS-25s were ignited first, before the shuttle was disconnected from the launch tower. The crew sensed this due to the orbiter briefly tilting down toward the external tank, and then leveling out again before the SRBs were fired. At 0, restraints were retracted and Columbia launched into the sky. Once it cleared the launch tower, it initiated its iconic roll program, moving into a tilted trajectory to achieve orbit. 56 seconds into the flight, Columbia was at Mach 1.06 and an altitude of around 35,000 feet or 11 kilometers. This is the area known as max Q, where the vehicle is subjected to the maximum amount of dynamic pressure from the air around it as it rockets through the thickest layers of Earth's atmosphere. To compensate for this, the shuttle's engines were throttled back to 65% thrust. The boosters outperformed expectations, making it something of a lofty launch before the boosters were separated at 174,000 feet, or 53 kilometers, 2 minutes into the flight. The shuttle's main engines burned for 8 more minutes before MECO, or main engine cutoff. 18 seconds later, the external tank was jettisoned. It would break up and fall into the Indian Ocean. After 2 more short controlled burns from the Orbital Maneuvering Systems engines, the shuttle was put into a stable orbit of around 273 kilometers by 274 kilometers. This wasn't what was expected. It was supposed to enter a slightly higher orbit of 280 kilometers, but the change went largely unnoticed. It appears it may have been some kind of rogue move by Commander Young to coincide the orbit with a pass of a satellite that could take images of the spacecraft on orbit. Once falling indefinitely over the surface of the Earth, the first goal was to open Columbia's payload bay door, which would allow heat rejection from the shuttle's systems. Following this, 53 hours were spent testing every single system aboard the vehicle. Each performed perfectly, save for a small amount of damage to some of the thermal protection tiles. After 36 orbits around the Earth, Columbia initiated a deorbit burn for 160 seconds. Commander Young pitched the orbiter upwards and prepared to re-enter the atmosphere. Then, for 21 minutes, communications went dark due to the ionization that was occurring around the vehicle due to the atmospheric resistance. The vehicle underwent stresses of around 12 pounds per square foot and speeds in excess of Mach 24. Once it went subsonic, Commander Young took the controls and lined up with the runway. Meanwhile, 2 astronauts in T-38 jets joined in formation.
Mark 15. Airspeed 271 knots. Fido says it couldn't be any better.
At 10:21 a.m. Pacific, Shuttle Columbia touched down on runway 23 at Edwards Air Force Base at 211 miles per hour. As they rolled to a stop, a very happy Commander Young had this to say.
This is the world's greatest all-electric fire brigade, I'll tell you that. It was super.
Okay, convoy's on its way.
Convoy launcher. We'll stop on the Columbia. We'll stop.
So there you have it. The very first space shuttle mission. A complete success. A few lessons were learned about what stresses the orbiter was capable of enduring, and everyone came home safe. A perfect way to start the program off right. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel, which is DeadKennedyInSpace. If you want to support me further, consider donating on Patreon or purchasing some of my work through Amazon or Teespring. Thank you, and I'll see you over the curve, Space Cowboys.
Lived there, on the mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam, in a vast cosmic arena.